Welcome humans to this video where we'll be looking into what functions are in programming. Let's start with an example. Let's say we go into a coffee shop to get your regular latte macchiato, but you have to explain every single step of the process to the barista. That's not very relaxing. That's what having no functions is like. If we introduce functions, we can go relax to our coffee shop and just tell the barista what you want, and they'll take care of the rest. That way you can enjoy with your friends, your coffee, or by yourself. Let's look at some code. In this Java code, we'll see what it looks like to have no functions. So if we take our coffee shop example, we would have to first say what you've ordered, and then it will do the different steps, like prepare the latte, grind the beans, brew it, froth the milk, and then finish. But what happens if someone else comes and would like a matcha, for example? You would have to again start from the beginning and then do this tedious job of explaining every single step to the computer. So we would have to be doing this all the time for every single new order, and it's not really efficient because we have to go and change everything by hand. Let's see what it would look like to have functions in this Java code. Let's see how our Java code would look like using functions. So here we have our class called coffee shop with our main method that calls only one other method, which is called order coffee. Before we write some code in it, let's see how a function is built. So here we have the function signature or method signature. First of all, we have the visibility. So visibility means who has access to this function. We have public, private. Private means that only inside this class we can use this method, or protected, which means only inside this package we can use it, but not outside. If we use public, then anywhere outside we can call this function. Then we have static. This one's optional. Static keyword has a very particular use case. I'm not going to go too much into it, but what you need to know is that if you have a method that starts with static, you can only call other static methods. So because our main method has static inside of it, we need to have static in all of the other methods that we're gonna call inside of here. Because if we were to remove it, then there's an error. It says non-static method cannot be referred in a static context. That's why we have to use static. If you guys are interested, I can have a shorter video of what static is, but for now, you just have to know that static can only call static methods. Then we have the return type. So here we have void. Void means that we do not return anything, but if our method should return a string, then we would have to declare it here. If we want to return, for example, an integer, then we would have to say int, and so on. But for our method, we're not gonna return anything. Then we have the name of our method. So this one is called order coffee. And remember that in Java, we have camel case. That means that every word starts with a capital, except the first one. And this one's very important as well. Here we have the parameters of the function. This means what information can we give this method, or what information does this method require. So for our case, we have what coffee type we want, and it's a string. Now let's look at a bit of code. So pretty much what we had before. We have our system out print where we print some information, and then we can even call different methods and so on. So if we take a look at the rest, we can see we have multiple methods. Prepare coffee, which has the grind coffee beans, brew coffee, froth milk, and they are all separate methods. As you can see, it's pretty clear what it is due to the name, so it's quite readable, and since it's split into smaller steps, it's much easier to understand, and we see that one thing is responsible for whatever it says here. So here we say it's grind coffee beans, it's responsible to grind coffee and nothing else. And this means we can reuse the code in the sense that if we would want to order a matcha, then we can just change here matcha and it would apply for the rest. So if we just run this part, we see here for our latte, and here our latte is ready, and then if we want matcha, then we see it prepares our matcha, and so on. So it's a way to reuse your code in different ways. Now let's look at a Python example. It's pretty much the same. Here we have our code just specifically for our latte. So if we would want for matcha, for example, we would have to copy this and then change each little piece of code, which is very error prone and also a very tedious way to program anything. So let's see how it would look like having functions in our Python code. So here we have our order coffee method, which also takes a parameter coffee type, and in Python we don't have to define any data type, so it just figures it out on the go. So we have here order coffee, and the way that a function is set up in Python, you started with def for define, then the name of our function, and this is in snake case. So snake case means that for every word we separate it with an underscore, and at the end we have a colon. What's very important in Python in general, you probably have seen, is the way we have here these white spaces. This is how Python knows how to separate certain pieces of code, whereas in Java you would have, for example, curly brackets. Now let's look at the whole example. Here we have the same thing, we have prepare coffee, and here we call our different methods that we have defined down here. And here we call our very first method. If we would want to order something else, like a matcha, then we just have to copy this line of code and say, okay, now I want matcha. And now I want... And you see how easy it is? It just reuses everything, and we don't have to copy anything anywhere. So yes, this was the Python code. Now let's summarize what we've learned today. So the reason we have functions is to reuse certain codes, so it allows us to define steps of making coffee once and not having to do it every single time, so we can reuse for different orders. Then modularity, you can break down the coffee making process into smaller, more digestible steps, and this makes it easier to understand the code and also maintain it. We have a certain degree of abstraction. That means when we just call order coffee from our main method in Java, for example, then we just know we're ordering coffee. We don't need to know anything of what happens behind the scenes. By having functions, we also offer readability of the code. Similar to having a recipe, it's easy to follow, and this makes it easier to navigate the code even for anyone new to the code base. I hope you enjoyed this video and you learned a lot, and I hope to see you very soon. I love ya!